Ed Weintraut talking. I was born February 19th, 1928. I was born in West Philadelphia on 62nd Street there with a midwife for me as the doctor, I guess. And we lived we lived on 62nd Street, probably on number 5 for about 4 years or 5 years there. And then I did have a broken leg there as a youngster. A girl up the street on her roller skates fell on me and broke my leg, so I can remember very vividly with a broken leg at that time. We moved across the street when I was approximately 5 or 6 years old. We moved across the street to 34 North 62nd Street. We had rented the house. The house at 34 North 62nd Street, which we rented, was sheriff's sale because the owner never paid the taxes. And within days, we had an option to get out of the house because it was going to be sheriff's sale within the week. So through the fact that he worked for the school board of education, they had a credit union. He was able to obtain a loan, and he turned around and bought the house at the time. So we became owners of the house and lived there all of my life until I left to get married, and my mother lived there all her life. My father worked for the Philadelphia School Board of Education as a steam fitting engineer, and all his life he spent reconstructing the furnace and heating systems of all the schools in Philadelphia, which were very numerous.
And what was his name?
His name was Edward Aloysius Weintraut. As a youngster, they thought he would be a priest, but he certainly didn't make it. And he was born up in central Pennsylvania somewhere. His father was born in Jed, Pennsylvania. My father's father was born in Jed, Pennsylvania. My mother, Cecilia Weintraut, was born in Czechoslovakia, came over as a young girl, probably about 14 years old, with her 3 brothers from Czechoslovakia, and she was transported up to Williamsport, and she was a house girl, like a maid, for a very rich family in Williamsport. She had a brother Frank, a brother John, and the 3rd brother was Anthony. Anthony had a problem and got sent away to a school for boys, and in horseback riding he fell off and broke his neck and he died. And Mom lived in Williamsport and met my father, Edward, somewhere at Williamsport at the Hollidaysburg, and they were married, and they lived over a garage because they didn't have a lot of finances. They used to live and sleep over a garage, like a sort of a attic type place, and she used to tell me how they looked out the windows and watched the rabbits running around at nighttime. They moved to Philadelphia, and for just a small sprint of time, they did live somewhere in South Philadelphia and had a little altercation with one of the Catholic priests or something, which turned my father off the Catholic Church forever, and we never went to Catholic Church after that. My sister Leona was the firstborn. That was the pride of my father. He doted over her all through her life. I was born 13 months later, and I grew up more in the background slightly because my sister Leona seemed to be first in my dad's life. Of course, Mom was very good to the both of us. My sister had a regular education and everything, and she was quite thin when she was 16 and had to go away to a camp in the summer, hoping that they could fatten her up or something under the Philadelphia rules of schooling. My sister finally married one of her boyfriends, a fellow who was in the Marine Corps who came home from Iwo Jima, Edwin Jacoby. He was a cab driver from Milwaukee, and he was posted in Philadelphia, and that's how she met him. And when he came back from the service, she married him. and they did live at our house for a while, and then they went on their own and moved in many various houses and had some financial problems keeping up with the rent themselves. My sister died approximately in the year 2000 or 2001, and a year later the brother-in-law also died. They had 5 children, and they are separated here and there all around the city and country, and one as in out in Las Vegas, Nevada. Growing up, I remember in junior high school I was playing baseball in the schoolyard, which was all concrete, and I fell down and broke my arm. So I did spend my summer vacation being off from school, home, sitting on the step, carving soap things. As a young fella, I was 10 years old. I started working at the American store down the street. I was more or less a cleanup boy and an errand boy. I had a wagon and at times took people's food to their homes. I worked in the American store till I was 16 years old. I became a clerk, and at the time of 16 I was notifying them that I was going to leave my work there and become working in a jewelry store. At the time then, at leaving, I was called in at the American store offices, and even at 16 years old, they were so well. I was so well liked. They promised me immediately that they would give me a store down 62nd and Pine Street, which was about a mile away. I could have a store to manage myself even at my early age, but I had to turn it down. At that time, I was going to Bach Vocational School to learn watchmaking, which I quit when I was 16 years old, because I wasn't learning anything, but due to my knowledge of mechanics of watches and clocks, which my father was a part-time hobbyist clock repairer, but he never fixed any watches, I was able to have enough knowledge to go to work at 16 years old in Germantown, and I fixed watches there for about a year. My first job at 16 at the store was 50 cents an hour. After I left there and went down to 6th and Chestnut Street to fix watches, which they were surprised of my knowledge and everything, after taxes I went home with $54.15 clear, and I was about 17 then, and when I was 18 I got my car and was able, due to working, save enough money that my father signed for the balance, and I got a Hudson car which cost about $2,200, which was a marvel in those days. I was drafted when I was 18, and I closed up my work and put all my things away, locked everything up, and got ready and took off and went down to report. And after 5 days of sitting around, they sent me home and said the war was over, so you can go back home. Of course, at work they thought I was 4F or something, but it turned out that I was drafted again when I was 23, 5 years later. After leaving the employment there, I went to work on Sansom Street for Finkel and Lessie as a watchmaker on the 2nd floor, and worked there for several years. After Finkel and Lessie working there, Postelov knew of me and of my experiences and what I did as a watchmaker, and took me away and hired me to run his store on 8th Street, 139 South 8th Street. It was a size of a bathroom, but we did business there for quite a few years. And then he moved across the street, 134 South 8th Street, and I worked there for close to 4 to 5 years. And finally, when his son-in-law came home, etc., and I had my first hernia there for lifting air conditioners and various things, I found a store on Walnut Street, 735. I was urged on by an old man to go and rent it and go in business, and I took the change, and I thought, well, I don't know how I'm going to get money to bring home, but I rented the store, and I've been there for 49 years. And after being there for about 15 years, I did buy the building, so I own the building, and that's at 735 Walnut. I bought the building because while renting it, I heard someone talking about, hey Ed, your place is being put up for sale. So I did hustle to it and everything. And at the time, the building was $50,000 to buy, and rates of interest were 10 to 12%. Whatever occurred, I gathered together all my finances and everything I could, and I did pay for the building in cash. I didn't have any mortgage at all. So at least going into business, I didn't have any rents to pay. Besides working all the time and spending a lot of time wallpapering the house in the evening after I came home, raising the children and taking them everywhere, and going out on vacations and things, I had a hobby of stamp collecting. Of course, I was very cautious and never overpaid for any stamp. All my stamps were never canceled out or anything. They're still with me. There's about 12 books of stamps. My other hobby was I loved music, and my wife, for some reason, we went out and she said, go ahead. So I bought an organ, a pretty big Wurlitzer organ, which we had in the parlor, which I tried a music teacher who was horrible, so I got rid of him, and I just played the organ from learning how to read music myself. Also, my mother-in-law had a piano in her house, and she was going to sell the house and move it. So I acquired the piano, but also seeing that she got paid, I think it was either $900 or $1,000 I paid her for the piano, because her son did buy it for her. So the piano was here within the house, so I played the piano and the organ, and I finally gave the piano to my one son, Robert. He has it down in his house, and they make fine use out of it. Also, my interest was in collecting pocket watches, which I may have a couple hundred of, and my other interest is in trains, which as a early married guy, I bought my children trains for Christmas for several years, and none of them were interested in any way at all. So I transformed my whole cellar into trains. I have 11 trains running down the cellar, and all sorts of beautiful platforms and things, and still there isn't anybody interested in it anyway. At least the grandchildren are good for at least 12 to 15 minutes. After that, off they go. So they visit it once in a while, but nobody's interested in the trains. So these hobbies have kept me very busy.
Yeah, we're done.